Tonight, the latest on the mega merger between AT&T and Time Warner, a look at the 24th Congressional District race between Colleen Deacon and John Katko, and an exclusive interview with Missouri political operative Raymond Radigan. This is Talking Points. Welcome to the October 27th edition of Talking Points. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Alex Amico. We have plenty of stories to get through tonight, so let's begin with a quick recap of some stories from the past week. Obamacare premiums will rise by an average of 25% across 39 states in 2017. While premiums are rising, officials say that 85% of recipients will be subsidized. Additionally, programs such as the reinsurance program have ended. With the absence of these programs, insurers have raised premiums to compensate. The Pentagon has been ordered to suspend its collection of enlistment bonuses from the California National Guard. Secretary of Defense Ash Carter stated that the measures to help affected Guardsmen are in place. The Pentagon says that up to 10,000 California National Guardsmen may have been affected. The House Oversight Committee opened an investigation into the case on Monday. The Gambia becomes the latest African nation to leave the International Criminal Court. The Gambia, along with South Africa and Burundi, have accused the ICC of only targeting African leaders. Gambian Minister Sheriff Bojang said the court failed to try Western leaders such as Britain's Tony Blair for war crimes. Other African countries such as Kenya and Namibia have also threatened to leave the ICC. A new report from the World Wildlife Federation and the Zoological Society of London has released findings of wildlife population declining by more than half. The reports showed that since 1970, wildlife population decreased by over 58% and may continue to decline to 67% within 10 years. Marco Lambertini, the Director General of the World Wildlife Federation, said that while there have been improvements in carbon dioxide emissions, much still needs to be accomplished for wildlife populations to recover. And next, there are a few groups that have been as instrumental in the fight against ISIS as the Kurdish Peshmerga. The ethnic group they defend, the Kurds, have long sought independence, and as the fight against ISIS comes to a head, the possibility of an independent Kurdish state seems more and more realistic. Talking Points international correspondent Elijah Shama is here to break down what Kurdistan might look like. Elijah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk first about a possible independent Kurdistan borders. What would it look like?
What we're seeing right now is that the regional government that they have centers around Erbil. It stretches all the way to Mosul in Iraq. We're talking about roughly 17% of Iraq under Kurds' control. Then we have a tip that's in Iran, and the important part is they have a lot of land in Turkey that's highly contested with the Turkish government.
And so we know that the Kurds are the largest ethnic group in the world without a state of their own, but do they have any sort of political organization right now?
They have a couple of political organizations spread out between Turkey and Iraq. In Iraq, they have the KUP and the KDP, which is the Kurdistan Democratic Party and the Patriotic Union of Kurds. In Turkey, they have the PKK and the KDP as well. The PKK is the stickler. They're a Marxist organization that has waged kind of a bloody civil war against Turkey for a very long time.
And what sort of relationship do these various Kurdish groups have with the West?
They've generally been friendly to the West. The West has supported them in a lot of their endeavors, but in a way they kind of feel used. They've been kind of the go-to since the United States doesn't want to put Western troops on the ground, and no other coalition state does either. They've kind of been seen as the scapegoats.
And so going back, I guess, big question is, where did this all start? Where did the whole push for Kurdistan start, and why has it not come to fruition? Well,
Kurdistan really stems from, if we go all the way back to post-World War II, these people saw kind of the nation building happening around them and said, we have a people and the Ottoman government is no more. Let's create a state. And they've continued to push, but Iraq and Iran have really kind of just used them and said, we're going to help you get statehood, and just really use them for fighting wars. We saw them back Iran in the Iran-Iraq war, and we've seen Saddam Hussein persecute them mercilessly in Iraq.
Okay, so we've got a group. It's a large ethnic group, largest without its own state. It's got support from the West. It's been fighting valiantly against ISIS, and a great deal of them are in Iraq, where there is considerable turmoil. What's standing in the way of them having their own state?
In a word, Turkey. Turkey really does not like these people. The civil war that the PKK has been fighting in Turkey is incredibly bloody. They've orchestrated terrorist attacks from Ankara to Istanbul, killing hundreds and hundreds of people. They really don't see that the Kurdish have kind of this right to their own independent state, and they're willing to fight them to keep it from happening.
All right, Elijah Shama, thank you for joining us. AT&T, the second largest mobile carrier, announced that it would buy Time Warner for $85 billion on Saturday. Both presidential candidates are skeptical about the massive proposed merger between AT&T and Time Warner. Donald Trump says he would block the deal if elected, and the Clinton campaign says regulators should scrutinize the deal. Talking Points national correspondent Sarah Nevin is here to explain the deal and the impact it may have on consumers.
At $85.4 billion, AT&T's plan to acquire Time Warner would be the third largest media buyout of all time, and it's a classic form of vertical integration. AT&T is a cable television and mobile service provider, but by acquiring Time Warner, it will expand into actually providing media content, gaining control of Time Warner's cable networks, including HBO, CNN, TNT, and the Warner Brothers studio. This gives AT&T a new audience to cater to, but it also has consumers concerned that AT&T will make it more difficult for competitors to get access to Time Warner's programming, either by slowing down the speed or raising prices. But AT&T's CEO says that the merge will make the consumer experience simpler and more enjoyable. Let's take a listen.
It seems to us like a very natural extension of what we do. We're in an environment where our customers are demanding more and more video, more and more entertainment content, not only on the TV, but on the mobile device. And we have a really large customer base in mobility. And the ability to take really premium quality content to our customers in the mobile environment is huge for us. It's huge for our customers.
Media consumption is changing. More people are viewing content on their phones and cutting the cord on cable. With this deal, AT&T is looking to stay ahead of its competitors by expanding its mobile streaming services and getting the most content to the most people as quickly as possible. Now, this merger will face intense scrutiny by regulators. The Justice Department will likely investigate the deal on antitrust grounds. And most of Time Warner's content cannot be regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, but it does use public airwaves from a TV station in Atlanta. The FCC could take those satellite licenses away if it doesn't believe the deal serves the public interest. Experts do believe that this deal will go through because of its similarities to the merge between Comcast and NBC Universal made in 2009. That passed with a few restrictions, and despite fears, hasn't led to any notable increases in prices for consumers. We won't know the sacrifices AT&T may have to make by acquiring Time Warner or what the final deal will look like until the end of next year.
On the other side of the break, a look at the local congressional race between John Katko and Colleen Deacon. Stay with us.
They said I have troll teeth.
That my voice sounded like a possessed baby doll.
That no one would ever love someone as stupid as me.
That I was fat, ugly.
Disgusting.
The effect of bullying is potent.
We will no longer be the silent majority.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
We're gonna take action with the I.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness, and so are you.
Here's your check.
Oh, you got it.
You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. Gone. No.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
On the heels of a major cyber attack last week that took down Twitter, Netflix, and other popular websites, the fallout from hacking appears to be more of a threat every day. That threat makes its way into the political sphere as well, and this year's election has been the clearest indication of it. With WikiLeaks, the Russian government, and even lone wolves, Clinton and Trump have been exposed on a level that would not have been possible without hacking. Are they negatively affecting the U.S. election or giving voters more information they can use to make better decisions at the ballot box? We have Talking Points international correspondent Tom Austin and contributor Tom Viola here to make the case for both. Guys, thank you for joining me. So, Viola, I want to start with you. Elephant in the room about Julian Assange, the head of WikiLeaks. Right now, he's sequestered in an Ecuadorian embassy in England to avoid a rape charge. And he's also pretty close with Vladimir Putin. He hosted a show on Russia Today, which is Putin's propaganda mouthpiece. Can we trust the information from WikiLeaks?
Yes and no. It's highly, highly unlikely that it isn't 100% fabricated, and it's much more likely that, at the very least, most of it is true. Most of these emails that we're seeing, the Podesta leaks, are real John Podesta emails, but there has been some questioning of the quality and the accuracy of some of them because allegedly the hackers were kicked out of the server around October 13th. Some of the emails have a publishing date of the 15th, which would lead to believe that they're fabricated.
And Austin, what sort of negative effects is it having on the election right now?
Well, so, you know, as you mentioned, Julian Assange is very much involved in this disruption of, I guess you could say, the electoral process, in the sense that an individual like him or another government has the power with information to, you know, kind of dictate where the election goes at certain points whenever they want to release the information. And so, like money is power, information is power as well. And having this information when you're a talented hacker, however, you know, moral your intention is, it can be detrimental to the electoral process.
Right, and Tom Viola, on the one hand, more information gets to the public and they have more information when they're making their choice for who to vote for. On the other hand, these are stolen documents. What are the ethics of hacking?
Well, certainly some hackers believe they see themselves as in a Robin Hood scenario. They're stealing this information to give it to the public, to make it free, because they see it as their way of exposing corruption, much like journalists are supposed to do. And the problem with that is sometimes you are dealing with classified documents, things that can damage a nation and have international political ramifications.
And so, going off of that, Tom Austin, where could hacking go wrong? Where could this information getting out about presidential candidates, where could it all go wrong?
Well, I guess it starts really with the hacker and his intention. Just recently, the Department of Homeland Security said that hackers breached into voter registration systems and collected information on upwards of 200,000 voters. And so with that comes this reaction from voters that they don't trust a system like that, and so they wouldn't be inclined to go out and register to vote.
Sometimes, even when the hacker does have good intentions, like in the case of Edward Snowden, he intended for those documents to be released to give information to the public, and he gave them to the New York Times. However, when they self-redacted some information to keep some people safe, they didn't do it properly, and you could see names, and it outed some CIA operatives, even though that wasn't the intention.
So with the most recent WikiLeaks, with all these different email dumps and everything, what does it say about the vulnerability of the United States to a cyber attack?
Well, this is twofold. On the security side, when you have things like Hillary Clinton using a private server, when you have politicians not using the proper secure lines and servers for communications, that can lead to state secrets being revealed. On the other end is the DIN server hack that brought down a major portion of the internet for a major period of time. That's private companies, and the issue there is more on the consumer end. They could absolutely take down a great deal of the internet because of how vulnerable our servers are.
And Tom Austin, I'm sorry I have to leave it there. Guys, thank you for joining me. While the race for president may get all the spotlight, it is just as important to stay on top of local congressional races. On November 8th, registered voters in central New York will take to the polls and vote for the House seat of New York's 24th congressional district. The race is between Republican incumbent John Katko and Democratic challenger Colleen Deacon. Both candidates are Syracuse natives, and Election Day is now less than 2 weeks away. Here with everything you need to know about the congressional race is Talking Points contributor Galat Malamed.
On October 14th, the New York Times put the race for New York's 24th congressional district as one of the top 10 most competitive House races in the country. 53-year-old John Katko has served one term in Congress. 39-year-old Colleen Deacon was Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's CNY regional director for 6 years before joining the congressional race. Back in August, Cook's Political Report labeled the race as a toss-up, but now less than 2 weeks before the big day, John Katko has taken a commanding 23-point lead. What makes this race competitive, though? The potential of a down-ballot effect from Republicans who aren't enthusiastic about going out to vote for Trump. Ultimately, the people of Central New York will take these final days to decide which candidate is best for them. So, where do the candidates stand on key issues? Some of the main topics they disagree on are immigration reform, the Affordable Care Act, and minimum wage. Colleen Deacon, who recently received an endorsement from President Obama, agrees with him on immigration policy. She said she supports his plans for comprehensive immigration reform and wants to offer a path to citizenship. John Katko's main concern is beefing up security at both the Mexican and Canadian borders before any talks of a path to citizenship are had. Deacon also sides with Obama overall on the Affordable Care Act, but like Katko, does not agree with some of the specific taxes. Katko wants to repeal Obamacare as a whole. And when it comes to the issue of federal minimum wage, Deacon sides with Obama again, wanting to immediately raise it from $7.25 to $10.10 an hour before gradually reaching $15. Katko sides with many congressional Republicans opposing the plan for $15 an hour, arguing it will lead to the loss of 500,000 jobs in the short term. It's a sprint to the finish now, and both campaigns are continuing to air numerous TV ads to try and get those last undecided voters.
Coming up after the break, an update on all of the Senate seats up for grabs on November 8th that could flip control of the Senate. Don't go anywhere. With all the talk of the upcoming presidential election, it's easy to forget the control of the Senate is up for grabs on November 8th as well. Democrats are hoping to regain their majority in the Senate, and 2016 is a good year for it. 24 seats held by Republicans are up for grabs compared to just 10 held by Democrats. Democrats need to flip 5 of those seats to gain a majority. Here to tell us what states we should be looking at and if the Senate could flip is Talking Points election correspondent Dan Prager.
Well, thanks, Alex. So there are 34 seats, and here they are up here. These states in light gray do not have a Senate race this year, and the ones in blue, like California, and the ones in red, like Arizona, seem to be pretty safe. So it comes down to the 10 states in gray. Taking away Ohio, which looks like it's going way for Senator Rob Portman, he's running away with the race, and you take away Wisconsin and Illinois, where Democrats look almost certain to flip the seat. It comes down to these 7 states here that are the ones that we really should look at. We'll start with the ones that are most certain. Indiana is an open seat with Senator Dan Coats retiring, and Democrat Evan Bayh seemed to have an easy path to victory. The Bayh name is famous in Indiana, and polls showed him way up there. However, reports that he has been lying about his residency in Indiana to be allowed to run have hurt his numbers. He'll probably beat opponent Todd Young to flip the seat, but it may be close. Florida seemed like a toss-up until Marco Rubio re-entered the race. Rubio has dominated most polls, and Dems have taken money out of Florida. A new poll had Patrick Murphy within the margin of error, but most others have Rubio up by a lot more. Moving on to the more interesting states, Missouri is a really strange one. It's typically red, but Democrat Jason Kander has made this race one to watch. His ad showing him assembling an assault rifle while blindfolded went viral, and some polls showed him way ahead of incumbent Roy Blunt. However, the race is very close and could be decided by just a point or two. New Hampshire is a very close matchup between current Senator Kelly Ayotte and current Governor Maggie Hassan. Recent polling shows them tied or within a few points of each other, so it really could go either way. And Pennsylvania is another one of those too close to call states. Incumbent Pat Toomey is facing off against Katie McGinty, a race that has swung much more toward McGinty since Trump's comments earlier this month. Depending on what polls you look at, either candidate could be in the lead. RCP has Toomey up by about 1, but 538 has McGinty up by just half a point. Moving on to North Carolina, where incumbent Richard Burr promised not to campaign until October. Seemed to be hurting him against challenger Deborah Ross, but Burr's numbers have picked up. Recent polls show him up by about 3 points, but that is within the margin of error. And finally, the only state the Democrats could lose is Nevada. Harry Reid is retiring, and it looked like Joe Heck could finally make that seat red. However, Catherine Cortez Masto has kept it close, and Trump's comments wiped Heck's lead away. Polling is wild in Nevada, so there are polls showing both candidates up by 8 or more points. But one thing to keep in mind is that Nevada is in the Western time zone, meaning their polls close 3 hours after the ones in New York. If the presidential election is called before then, and it very well may, some Nevada Republicans may stay home, helping Cortez Masto. So if we update the map up here, it comes down to really 5 swing states, and Democrats only need to win 2 of them to tie up the Senate, and if it's a senatorial tie, it'll go down to the vice president, which looks like it might be Democratic. Odds are they'll get at least 2, but there's a pretty good chance they're going to pick up more than that.
Thanks, Dan. Yesterday, I spoke with Missouri political operative Raymond Radican. Despite the fact that polls are showing Clinton competitive in states that traditionally lean Republican, like Georgia and Arizona, Senate races in those states aren't very close. However, in Missouri, as Ray tells us, the opposite is true.
Well, Missouri is a little bit of an interesting case this year, I think. I mean, for one, you've got Roy Blunt, who hasn't backed off his endorsement of Trump, which is a big issue for a lot of for independents around here. But on the other side, you're looking at a state that nominated Eric Greitens for governor and Donald Trump for president. Both of these guys are really conservative, they're really beating that outsider drum, if that makes sense. So I think the outsider thing is really playing well to Missouri voters this year, which is why you're looking at Trump is looking good in the polls for president. And then you've got Kander, who's really working as the outsider, even though, of course, he's currently the Secretary of State here. Roy Blunt has been in office on Capitol Hill since the late 90s. And so right now that anti-establishment kind of vibe you're feeling is really big in Missouri and has really helped Jason Kander.
And so perhaps the event that put the Missouri Senate race in the national spotlight more than anything else was an ad for Kander where the Army veteran responds to an attack on his gun record by assembling a gun while blindfolded. I asked Ray what effect that has had on the race.
Honestly, I can't even tell you how big that was because, for one thing, I'd actually been playing around on his YouTube page just about a week or two before that came out. And one of the things I noticed was that, every now and then, you'll see Jason on TV with an advertisement. But when he posts these ads on YouTube, he's just getting views in the hundreds, not even breaking 1,000. As most of us saw, that gun advertisement broke 1 million views in a matter of a week. And I think it ran up another 1 million in the next week. And so that was a game changer for him because I think the biggest advantage that Jason had coming into this election is that as of this summer, as recently as this summer, he was polling about 7 points behind Blunt, but his unknown ratings were extremely high, meaning he had a lot of impressions to make and a lot of ground to make up. And I think that ad really took him to the kitchen tables in Missouri.
Kander and the Democrats competitive in Missouri, it begs the question of whether or not this suggests a more permanent shift in Missouri like Democrats are hoping to get out of Arizona. Or is this election just out of the ordinary? Here's what Ray had to say.
I think this is a weird election year. So for one, this seat that Jason's running for, which, as you mentioned, he does have a good chance to win, this is a seat that's been Republican since the 80s. Before it was Roy Blunt, it was Kit Bond for numerous terms. Missouri hasn't gone Democratic since Bill Clinton. It came very close in 2008, actually, when John McCain was able to beat Barack Obama by something like just under 4,000 votes. But this is a red state. It's a weird year, and I think Jason Kander is doing a great job of taking advantage of that.
When we come back, a look at polling science and how polls are conducted. How much can we trust them? We'll have the answer in a minute.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
Taking care of a family member can lead to plenty of questions. Fortunately, there's a place to get the answers, for them and for you. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. Now, polls are studied in elections to see who is winning and to help journalists and citizens understand the election. Pollsters face many challenges as it is very difficult to get a good survey that accurately represents the entire population, whether it be in a county or the entire country. Plus, you can often find different polls which support very different results. So, is polling really accurate, and why do we still use it? Talking Points political correspondent Josh Carney and contributor Josh Feinblatt are here to discuss. Guys, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us,
So,
Alex.
Feinblatt, I want to start with you.
Sure.
Let's get in the nuts and bolts. How are polls conducted?
So we've all got those calls at home before. They ask us, who are you supporting? Maybe some other questions. So political organizations or news sources will pay independent polling companies, and so those companies then have to recruit or call or get in contact with at least 1,000 people. But sometimes it's very difficult because they have to proportionally represent the populations that they're trying to poll. So those are very difficult things. They're trying to get even amounts of men and women and everything like that. But the more responses they get, the more information they can weigh in, the more accurate usually the poll is.
And so, Carney, just beyond the horse race, who's winning, who's losing, who might win, who might lose, what can polling help us understand in an election?
It helps us understand a very small sample of the population, but what's critical when looking at what polling can help us understand about specific elections is looking at local polling, which is often done with a more stringent populace, which would ultimately correlate directly to that district. Now, what that actually means is that if you're polling within a district and it's doing local polling, you're getting better answers, as opposed to a 2,000 person small sample for an issue that faces the entire nation. It can have very varied opinions. So it's a push, but it also kind of gives us a little leeway into what people are actually thinking.
And so, Feinblatt, with the rise of these new different types of technology, how has polling changed in recent years, and how have the changes affected its accuracy?
So it's a lot more difficult to poll now. Compared to the 2008 election, 8 in 10 houses had landlines and that people responded to. Now it's about 5 in 10. And also in 2008, there was about a 36% response rate. Now they're lucky if they get 10 if they keep calling them. And that's because young people are less likely to have landlines. And if they do get calls on their cell phone, they're less likely to pick them up because they don't know the numbers. And those computers can't call cell phones, so they physically have to type them in. So it's very difficult to get a wide range, especially with young people. And it's also, they don't take into account the 7 million people that don't live inside this country but still vote. So it's very difficult than in years past to get an accurate sample.
And so Dan was talking earlier, in some of these states for Senate races across the country, polling can be very erratic. One will show one candidate up, one will show the other candidate up. There's no real pattern that emerges from them. What sort of political repercussions does that have on a race?
Well, one, it has interesting repercussions, but two, it's important to understand what's actually going on there, and that's an example of a push poll in which the candidates are taking a very small sample size, asking targeted questions about their opposition, and are obviously getting leading answers that get them to a certain point of which the poll is trying to sway. Now, the implications that has politically on a national or even a local scale is that polling that isn't done right isn't accurate, and therefore if it isn't accurate, it's not giving you the right information to find what you actually need to find. So polling in that sense can be useless. So over-polling and actually finding push polls that sway elections artificially is what is destructive and totally wrong with polling.
And so Galat was talking earlier about the congressional race here, where most polls show John Kakko opening up a pretty huge lead on Colleen Deacon.
Right.
How do local politics factor into these polls?
Local politics factor in because there are specific endorsements, and then there are also regional politics that you have to factor in. So based on voting blocks that have a huge attribution to the population, whether it's the Syracuse mayor's endorsement or whether it's the Onondaga County official's endorsement, those can sway an election in a specific direction. But it's also a byproduct of regional politics.
Right. Josh's, thank you for joining me. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to check out our newest webisodes on the Philippines and climate change coming tomorrow. And don't forget our latest blogs on CitrusTV.com. For Talking Points, I'm Alex Amico. Good night, Syracuse.